That's the sound we're going to be looking at how to make. It is a pretty straightforward sound, and as you can see, there are some pretty cool things you can do here. That effect is accomplished by just automating a filter and some reverb. So let's go over just the main idea of this patch. So this patch has 3 oscillators, and they're right here. So we have oscillator 1, 2, and 3. And I was just sort of looking for interesting things that layered together. So I didn't come in here with any sort of specific ideas in mind. I just wanted things that would sort of sound cool together. And these are the ones that I settled on. So we can actually hear each layer individually. So that's layer 1. If we look at layer 2, that's layer 2 and layer 3. So they each sort of fit their own little pocket, and that's all I was really looking at doing. And in here, you see I sort of experimented with different types. Well, on the one, we have a saw pulse width modulation. And then in here, you can also come in and choose different wavetables, and you can scroll through those wavetables. And so these just give you options. So I would pick 3 things and layer them up together. And of course, I'm listening to all 3 as I'm playing them back, and I can't remember the balance I had, but find a balance that you like. And that's just the first step in making this sound. The next thing we want to do is, this is being driven heavily by a filter movement. There are 2 steps to building this. The first step is pick your filter. So I picked the Perfecto filter. I tried all of them, and the Perfecto filter is by far the sharpest. And by sharpest, I mean when it turns off, it clamps down the hardest. The effect is the most clear to me. And then I screwed around with the resonance, sort of looked for something that I liked. For example, let me just pick another one. So you get these different vibes from each of them. And I kind of knew what I was aiming for, and so I liked the clearness of the Perfecto a little more. And I used the shaper module again. I love this thing. So it's just a module. It can filter. You can use this this cutoff knob to filter things. But I love what it adds to the table when you put it in saturate. So for example, let me put it in fold back. That's what you get. Here's saturate. And then if I don't have it on at all, that's what this would be doing. So the saturate module is just epic. So this is one that I just put on a lot of things. But now that we have our filters set up, you might be going, what about the movement that's happening? Well, that's being accomplished by the stepper 2. So down here we have all these tabs. And so I went with stepper 2, and you can click on these different boxes to select, what's going to happen when it reaches that step. And then down here you can pick, like for example, this one's on X3. That's why you get 3 of these things, and so on and so forth. I adjusted my sequence to sort of do this triplet thing. So it's like a 1 note and then a triplet, another note, then a triplet. And then we have duples here, or I don't know, just 8th notes or whatever. So it just does 2 instead. And I thought that would be kind of a cool idea to have this like 3, 3, 2, 2. And I changed the loop start and end. Well, I left the loop start at 1, but the end I put at 8. And so now it just loops through the top 8. So we're not using the bottom 8 at all. Pretty straightforward. Another important thing that while we're here that you should turn on is mono. So mono makes it so that when you push notes, they share the same envelope. This is easier to demonstrate. So let me just turn it off. If I play a note and then play a second note, if they're not perfectly in sync, they'll get their own envelopes, and this shape will be independent for each note, and it'll get really messy. Very quickly. And so mono makes it so that they all have to share the one envelope. So that is an important setting to know about. So make sure you have that on. And then these are already on, so I'm not even going to bother with these. Now, I did change the voices up to 16. And in the unison mode, I changed it to 4 voices. Just adds clones of the oscillators. I was going for a sort of a more of a thicker sound. I didn't actually get quite what I was going for when I did this, and I just sort of left it. So it was a move that happened in there. I wouldn't consider it super important, but it will make a difference. So there's 4 voices, and I bumped up the number of voices just so I could sort of use all of these as I went. It'll begin to drop voices and things after you break the number that you set, and 16 was as high as it could go. So that's what I went with. But anyways, there's the notes. So now we have the sequencer, but we still need to connect it to the filter. This brings us to the last step really in configuring the bulk of the patch. The rest is just effects. So if we come into the matrix tab, because you'll notice there's not like a straightforward way to do it in here. It's because you go to the matrix tab and on your source, pick stepper 2. So stepper 2 is now going to be, you know, connected to things. And then you have over here, you have your targets, and I selected the cutoff one as my first target. So for example, if I put this back at 0, you can just double click. That's the sound we would have. And that's because the stepper 2 is also modulating these things. So by giving the trigger the control over the cutoff knob, so you have to come in here and go to filter, cutoff 1, and that's going to link it. The next thing is I've also linked it to the main volume. This does do a volume boost to it, but there's other things in here that when it interacts, I just liked the interaction more. So I would probably just tame this back in the mix because I like some of the processing, how it changes when it's driven a bit harder. So let me just show you. I'll play it like softer. And you see the reverb too, just, I don't know what it is, but there are differences here. And if I bring it up, things just jive a little bit better. And so that's the main, that was actually a happy accident. I didn't actually anticipate that to do what it did. And the last 2 triggers, I was looking to connect the stepper 2 to just other things to make it more interesting. And so I actually went through a lot of things in the list, mostly in the oscillators, messing with different wavetables and different oscillator ideas. And like, for example, this is on Robo 2, and this one's on like Violin 2, but I did this thing with the control A and B. You might be going, how did you come up with that? It was just a lot of screwing around. There wasn't like a specific idea here. And so these are sort of like that. I went through and screwed around a bunch. I found that I liked Oscillator 1, the wavetable mix, which is this knob here. If we go to Oscillator 1, it's just doing this. Essentially, the stepper is allowed to move it. And this is a really interesting one. This one was sort of directed. I wanted to know what it would be like if I let the stepper control the reverb color. So the color's right here. And let's set this to 0. So that's if the reverb sits still. If I bring it down and then just a little bit more up, and let's go this way. So that's the reverb color. And so I said, you know what, let's just find out. And I really liked the pumping it sort of invited in the reverb through the color knob. It was just sort of an interesting idea. So I kept it and thought that was cool. So that's the matrix tab and the general way the synthesizer actually produces this pumping sort of a sound. The rest is just effects, nothing too crazy. So I do a couple fancy things with the reverb a little bit later. But other than that, I just turned on the mix. You see it's actually pretty heavy right now. And set the color right where it was at. I think it was a little closer to something like this or whatever. And delay, nothing. Chorus is on, but just a little. And this is to soften the sound. If I actually bring this down, it helps out with that high harshness just a touch. I liked it I liked what it was doing, so I didn't want to touch it too much. That was this. I originally had it actually quite a bit heavier, and I wound up going back because I liked it not so straightforward. So this is sort of a more subtle move. Phaser's not on, and the shaper I messed with and decided against it, so you'll notice that it is also off. The EQ is on, and there's a very light boost, but I have these additional controls on, these tabs. And if we turn these off, we get a tone change. And I really liked this. And make sure, in order to turn it on, make sure you actually hit the EQ button. And that's basically what I settled on. I was also very surprised. This is one of those graphs that the curve looks so small, but it is going to make a much bigger impact on the sound than it looks like it's gonna. So if we just give it like a little more boost, to me at least, it feels like it's a lot more boost than I was bargaining for. Like, wow. So very responsive equalizer. Just this one, working with this one, I'm always like, this is like going to change the sound. I got to be careful about where I move things, but it's really, really useful for that. So anyways, that's this idea. Let's talk about the songwriting portion. Now I just wanted a chord progression that would sort of demonstrate it. So this is sort of it doing its thing. And I automated the reverb, and the reverb is this one, and the filter, which is that one. So I'm moving this knob, and I'm also moving the reverb dry wet. So we start with a modest amount. Let me detach these, actually. I can do that. And there's some like post, like a riser and an impact sound, just to sort of sell it a little bit more. Hopefully help you see the vision. But what happens is the reverb starts at a modest level, and I wrote a chord progression so that as it progresses, let's just pull this up here. So there's a chord progression, music theory stuff, you know, all that kind of a thing. And there's like a suspension right here that goes and releases down. And that's like really nice. So there's a couple things going on here. And some of it takes advantage of that gating, that effect that we're doing with the reverb. So this happens, and then we go to this very low note. And what's happening is the filter turns up, and so when the filter's down, this trigger source can pump it for me. But when I push the cutoff knob up, it can only push up from where it was. So now there's a static offset, and so the filter begins to turn off as a result and open up. And so that's what's happening here. And I did it to sort of match the chord progression. So it matches the musical idea. And I thought that was really cool. And then the reverb, I thought it'd be cool so the sound will become a smoother, more cohesive just thing. And then the reverb will come in at the very end until it's 100% reverb. So it ends out and just like, I imagine like a wave of color, and then it just splashes down and just mist is just flying past you. Like that's, I don't know. I've always connected reverb to sort of ocean mist. I feel like that's just what reverb is to me. But it hits, and then I thought it'd be cool to have a really low note sort of playing out, but it's all reverb for a little bit. And the reverb was gated. It was controlled by the trigger. So it's still going to have that effect on it. And then this is important. You need to let the filter come off just a little bit at a time. If you take it off too soon, you'll lose the magic of the reverb. You got to leave it on and just sort of hone it in. This is a balancing act here. And so I settled on a much longer curve. Originally, it was like up here, and it kind of kills the effect. So it's all reverb. So to me, that felt a little fast. I don't know, actually, that was still pretty cool. But I was having issues earlier with the reverb amount. Maybe it's the reverb amount, it's the more special thing. Where if you take this down too quickly or off too much, it's going to very quickly become dry. So I left this at a very high value and only slightly nudged it off, because if we take it down, like, you know, it's a different kind of an effect. And I really liked the airiness of the reverb. But anyways, those two things come together along with the impact of how I've sort of sculpted the progression. And we just climaxed, and now we are building back up. Things are happening. And so to me, this is a really cool transition, really easy thing to do. It's all in one patch, and that's a nice kind of a thing. That's that. If you have any questions, let me know. Subscribe and hit that bell icon for future videos. And have a blessed day.